Hey, Amid Al. Masechta Sukkah, hey, Amid Al. Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Omer. Me'olam la yarda shchina lamata. We're going to prove that the smallest sukkah is 10 tvachim. So we said that the aron was 9 with a kapoires that was 1 tefach, which made it 10 tefach aron. And the Gemara says, "Me'olam la yarda shchina lamata." The shchina never went lower to the ground. We're going to see that the shchina was always ala kapoires. So the kapoires is a 10 tvachim. So the shchina never was lower than 10 tvachim. And even though it says that Moshe Rabbeinu and Eliyahu Hanavi were taken up to Shamayim, they didn't. Shenamar Shamayim Shamayim Lashem. V'aretz nasan l'bnei adam. Shamayim is for Hashem. Aretz is for people. Freit the Gemara of V'lo yard the Shechina lamata. What, the Shechina never came down? Aksiv Vayevid Hashem al Har Sinai. The Gemara says Lamala Mesar Tvachim. He came down, but he did not venture within 10 tvachim of the ground. In Zechariah Hanavi, it says his feet will be on Har HaZeisim. It's not on the ground itself, it's above 10 tvachim. But Moshe V'Eliyahu didn't go up to Shamayim. Aksiv u'Moshe ala Elokim. Yeah, but Lamata me'asara, but he remained under 10. Aksiv ayal Eliyahu b'sara Shamayim. Eliyahu was taken up in a storm to Shamayim. Lamata me'asara.
Yeah, Ernie,
yeah.
I just want to say tonight's my mother's yurt site.
Oh, okay. So we're going to learn the
Mishkat Bas Tzvi Halevi.
Mishkat Bas Tzvi Halevi. Okay.
Thank you.
I vaksiv me'aches pnei chisei parshes alav anano. In Iyuv, former of Tachwood, Melamed Shapire Shakai Mazish Shchinaso Vananu alav. The Shechina spread his cloud over Iyuv. However, Iyuv remained lemata me'asara. Yeah, but it says Iyuv held on to the kisei. Ishtarbu v'ishtarviv le'kisei adasara v'noket pei. The kisei went down to asara. And Moshe, within 10 tvachim, was able to grab onto it. But he himself did not go up l'mala masara. So the kapoires, being above the kapoires, is above 10 tvachim. And the aron itself is within 10 tvachim. Mashma.
But wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu extremely tall?
Correct, but he remained.
Okay.
So you want to say that his height alone would put him above, but I guess you go where his feet are.
Okay. All right. Just wondering.
So this gives us the pshat that up to 10 tvachim is a different rishus. Now, Bishlama Aron Tisha, I understand why the Aron is 9 tvachim. The Chsiv, the Asur Aron Atzei Shitim, Amasayim V'chetzi Arko, Amav V'chetzi Rachbo, Amav V'chetzi Kamaso. 1.5 amas. In Amma is 6 tvachim, so 1.5 is 9. With the kapoires of a tefach, that got us to the 10 tvachim. Ela kapoires tefach minolan. Who told you that the kapoires is only 1 tefach thick? The Tani Rab Chanina, Kol HaKelim Shasa Moshe, Nostabem Tor Midas Arkan, Midas Rachban, Midas Komoson. all the kelim that Moshe made, we were given their width, the length, and the height. The kapoiris, which is the covering to the aron, midas arko, midas rachba nosno, the length and the width were given, but midas karmosa loy nosno. How high it was not given. So let's learn from the least of the kelim. Shenamar v'asita lo mizgeret tofach saviv. By the Shulchan it says they made a mizgeret is like a fencing around it, and it was a tefach. Ma'alahalan tefach afkan tefach. So we see the smallest structure in the kelim was a tefach. So therefore, we'll say that the kapoires was also a tefach. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? V'neilef mekelim gufayu. What do you mean? Let's learn from the Shulchan itself, which was 10 tefach, whatever, however tall it was. Why are we learning from the smallest? Gemara answers a famous answer: tefasta meruba loy tefasta. Grabbing the highest shear, you're not grabbing anything. Tefasta muat tefasta. The concept of tefasta muat tefasta refers to the fact it's that one tefach, which is the least, fits into 10 tefach, but 10 tefach doesn't fit into one, meaning it's like the least common denominator concept. That's the tefasta muat tefasta. Well, says the Gemara, if you're going to learn from the smallest, neilef mitzitz, there's a kli that's smaller than the mizgeret. The tzitz, the crown that was worn by the Yom Kohen Gadol, the Tanya tzitz doimek min tashel zav. It was like a golden shield. Rachav shtei etzbos. It was 2 finger breadths wide. Mukaf me'oizen la'oizen. It went from ear to ear. The kosav alav shtei shitin. There were 2 rows. Yud K milmala. Yud K was above. The kodesh lamed milmata. It means kodesh laShem, but they put the Hashem's name Yud K above. V'amar Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yosi, ani re'isiv beroimi. I was in Rome after the Churban, and I saw the tzitz in Rome, because the Romans had taken it captive. The cost of Allah Kodesh Lashem b'shita achas. He claimed that the words Kodesh Hashem was in the same row, not same line, not one line above the other. But the Gemara is basically asking, the tzitz was two etzbos. Why don't we go down? If you're saying tefasta muat tefasta, so go down to the tzitz's dimension. And for the Gemara, danin kli mi kli, ve'ein danin kli mi tachshit. The tzitz was a tachshit, not a kli. So we don't learn the dimensions of kapoiros, which is a kli, from a tachshit, which is human clothing. For anything more of a neilef mizer, it says by the Shulchan, and it says by the other kelim that had a zer, and from the Mishkan, from the Mizbeach, that had a zer zahav. The Aron, the Aron, or the Mizbeach, that it had like a crown. And a zer is bimashu, which is even a smaller shear. And for the more danin kli mikli, vein danin kli mehechsher kli. The zer is not a kli; it's a way to beautify a kli. Yochim is geras nami extra klihu, but this decorative circular or this thing that went around the shulchan, lochor is also a hechsher kli. How can you learn from the mizgeres? And for the Gemara mizgar to lamatai, so the mizgeres was on the bottom, where it was part of the binyan of the kli, was not a decoration. Fine. That's going to go to the Mandora that says the Mizgeres was on the bottom of the Shulchan. El Mando Omar Mizgar to Lamalo, I saw that it's just a decoration, Michael Lememar, then you can't learn from there. Hi Hechsher Kliyu. So we're back to the question, how did we know that the Kaporis was a tefach? We learn it from something where the Torah gave us a measurement. Midavar shenasla b'Torah mida. Vayichichu tzitz v'zer shalom nasla ben Torah mida klal. The dimension of the zer and the dimension of tzitz was not written in the Torah. Those are rabbinic measurements. Therefore, we'd learn it from the kaporis, because at least some of the kaporis' measurements were given mefurish in the Torah. Ravuna learns a different source for why the kaporis was a tefach. It says al pnei kaporis kedma, that you'll place it on the east side of the kaporis. Vein ponim pachos mitefach, a face, because that's the word pnei, it's not less than a tefach. Vein ka'ape davar yuchni, maybe it's the face of an ostrich, which is a huge bird, or the Rashi says it's a mystical bird, like a dragon or something, because it says the Bar Yochni dropped an egg into an ocean, and 60 cities were flooded. So, anyways, it may be a guzma, but it's a siman that a face of a very large creature is much larger than a tefach. Again, the Gemara answers, tefasta meruba loy tefasta. Taking a large measurement, we don't take tefasta mu'at tefasta. We always take the smallest. Well, if you're going to take smaller, ema ka'ape de tzipur, take a face of a sparrow or a robin, a small bird, which is much smaller than a tefach. Om Rav Acha bar Yaakov Ravuna pnei gomar. He actually learned it like a Gzeir Shava, pnei, ksivocha el pnei kapor, ksivosam, me'es pnei Yitzchak aviv. Referring to a human being. Maybe it's a ponim referring to heavenly creatures. Kiros pnei Elokim batirtzeni. In one place it refers to the pnei Elokim. Tefasta meruba loy tefasta. But again, taking large measurements we don't take. Tefasta muat tefasta. Nelef mikruv. So the kruvim were those cherubs that decorated the kaporis. And they, l'chora, were babies. And so l'chora, that face would be smaller than the tefach. On Rav Acha bar Yaakov Gemiri ein pnei kruvim pchusim mitefach. Even the kruvim were not less than the tefach. So that Ravuna learns the pnei is the face of a kruv, which is a tefach. So therefore, the pnei of the kaporis was also a tefach. Ravuna hamanami me'acha gomer. And Ravuna also learned from here. My kruv. What's a kruv? On Ravavo karavia. The kruv is like a baby. That's what the kruvim were. She came to Bavel, Korlianuka Ravia. In Bavel, they called the child Ravia. In Yecheskel, where they describe the heavenly chariot, it says one face was a kruv and one face was a human face. Well, that's two human beings. Hainu kruv, hainu adam. Api Rav, api Zutra. That's in fact what it wanted. He wanted an old face and a young face. So according to the Mandomar, so when we've been discussing the minimum shear of a sukkah, we said that the schach has to be a 10 tefachim above the ground, meaning the airspace from the ground to the schach has to be 10 tefachim. Who says, Ema bahadi schach? Maybe, let's say if the schach was a tefach thick, maybe the airspace from the ground to the schach only has to be 9. And with the schach, it has to be 10. And for the Gemara, because we learned from the building of the Beis Hamikdash. The house that Shlomo Melech built, Shishim Amma Orko, was 60 amas length, Esrim Rochbo, 20 amas wide, Ushloshim Amma Koimoso, and 30 amas tall. Uksiv, Koimas Hakru Va'echod, Eser Ba'ama, B'chein Hakru Va'sheni. The kruvim that were on top of the Aron was a chadasar, ha'echad eser ba'ama. So the Gemara will say, "V'tanya mama tzinu v'esolomim kruvim b'shlisha bayis hein oimdim." The kruvim that Shlomo made stood on the ground on their feet. And it said the kruv was 10 amas high. And the roof was 30 amas. So it went up to a third of the height of the building. So the Mishkan too, nami kruvim b'shlisha b'aysim oimdim. So the kruvim in the Mishkan were also a third. Mishkan kamahavi asar amos. In contradistinction to the Beis Hamikdash, which was 30 amos, the Mishkan was only esar amos. The chsiv esar amos orach hakorish. The beams were esar amos. Kamahavi luhu. Now, an amma is 6 tfachim. So if it's 10 amos, you're talking about 60 tfachim. Shisin pushchi. So a third, if the height of the kruvim could be a third of the how tall the Mishkan was, tilsi kamavi esrim pushli. You're talking about 20 tfachim each kruv. Now, dalas are on the kapoires. Where was the head of the kruvim? The head was at the height of the aron, which were 10 tvachim. So from the head down, if the whole kruv was 20 tvachim, is 10 tvachim. Uses the language of schach. The kruvim had wings, and they covered their heads. We'll see. We just said that the wings had to be above 10. But that if the wings were covering their head. Now, who told you that the wings were covering their head? Maybe they were above their head. Because it's lamala. I could be above their heads. It doesn't say above. It says lamala, which is at the height of their head, as opposed to being, for example, at the side of their body. Now, This analysis, Hanicha works out the Rav Meir. The Omar kol ha'amos hayu beinonim. These amois were middle amois, which a middle amma is an amma of 6 tfachim. El Rabbi Yehuda Amar Amar shel binyan shisha tfachim. He agreed that the various structural ammas were 6, but shel kelim chamisha. He held that, for example, the aron, when it says it's an amma and a half, that amma was an amma 5 tfachim. So the height of the aron was only 7.5, not 9. Then you've lost your source that for the height of a sukkah, right? Because Michael, remember, Arma Karetz Kama Avalut, Tamne Upalgi, right? The aron is going to be 7.5, because we just said 1.5 times 5 is 7.5. And then you have the kaporos, which is 1. So the aron and the kaporos are going to be 8.5. Partial chatzrei palga, you're missing 1.5 amas. Maybe emisukah davi chatzrei upalga. Maybe the airspace of a sukkah doesn't have to be so high. So you have 8.5, the aron. And then the kruvim, remember we said was shlisha bias, which was 20. So 20 minus 8.5 is 11.5. That's how high the wings were above. So maybe the sukkah could be up until could be 11.5 tvachim, not 10. I never heard such a shita. So where did we come? Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's a problem for me. El Rabbi Yehuda hilchos gemir lo. It's not a problem. Rabbi Yehuda had a halacha, the Moshe Misinai, that the shear of a sukkah is 10 tvachim. Where do we see such a concept that we were given shiurim halacha l'Moshe Misinai? Amar Chia Barashem Arav. Shiurim, the various measurements like kazayas, if I eat a kazayas nevela, all the various shiurim, chatzitzin, the din of what is choitzitz from a mikveh, umechitzin, the various dinning, how tall does a wall have to be to create a house? All of this is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Freik the Gemara, shiurin d'oraisa ninu. How can you tell me that shiurin is halacha l'Moshe Misinai, is rabbinic, or halacha l'Moshe Misinai, which is not d'oraisa? Shiurin are d'oraisa. D'chsiv in Parshas Ekev, Eretz Chito Soira. Eretz Yisrael is a land of wheat, barley, gefen ute'ena v'rimon, grape, fig, pomegranate, Eretz Zeit Shemen Udvash, olive and honey. Now, the whole pasuk, the Gemara is going to darshan, really refers to shiurim. Chita, why does it mention wheat? L'bayis hamenuga, giving us a din regarding a house that is afflicted with negat saras. This not. Anichnas l'bayis hamenuga. Person walks into a house with saras, the kelev al ktefav, he's got clothing, not wearing them, they're folded on his shoulders. The sandala v'taboisav biyado, he's carrying his shoes and his rings in his hand. Hu ve'ein tmein miyad, his physical body, these things that are on his shoulders and his hands immediately become tamei without any delay.
Do we say halacha l'Moshe Misinai is not it's Rabbanan, not deraisa?
It's
Is
not
that what
the
it comes
same.
out to?
Yeah, it's not the same level. Halacha l'Moshe Misinai is not the same. It's Gemiri. It's part of Masorah. It's part of Torah Shabbat Peh. And it doesn't have the same status as Deraisa, as full-fledged Deraisa.
So,
The dinim of halach l'mashmitz are all, for example, the fact that tefillin has to be square and has to be black. It's halach l'mashmitz Sinai. It's on a very high level, but you want, for example, there's no malchus. The only something that you violate me the right. Halach l'mashmitz Sinai are various details that were given halach l'mashmitz Sinai by Hashem as part of Torah Shabbat Peh. That's not Deraisa. Deraisa is lo yisrachal chametz, written in the Torah.
whatever is written, yeah.
But there's an Isra chametz. There's a whole hierarchy. There's Deraisa, there's halach l'mashmitz Sinai, then there's divrei Kabbalah, then there's divrei Nevi'im. Different halachas have different categories.
So as far as Karbonis, that's only Deraisa.
Korbanos have a din of Deraisa. Bringing a chates, bringing an asham, a shlamim. There are 613.
So that's Deraisa.
365 lavim
Yeah, Deraisa,
and
yeah.
248 mitzvahs aseh.
So that's all Deraisa, of course.
Those are Deraisa. Then there are many dinim that are halach l'mashmitz Sinai that don't have the same status. There's a Rambam that goes into this. There's actually, Rav Herschel Schechter has a series of 10 lectures. I've listened to them in the car. They're very good. He analyzes all of this, these various gedorim, these various hierarchies.
Sure, very good.
Correct.